Hello, Canada. It's good night, Qatar. What is happening? I don't know what shenanigans are going on this side here. Oliver Platt, Gareth Wheeler, Jordan Wilson. I'm your host, Annie Petrillo. Gentlemen, we already knew that Canada was officially eliminated after that game against Croatia, but it is time to actually drop the curtain on their time at Qatar 2022. They ended with their final group stage game against Morocco. It was a 2-1 loss for the Canadians. Now, this game could have been 3-1. Morocco had a goal called back, or it could have been 2-2 because Atiba Hutchinson was this close to tying it up. But it does begin with a 4th-minute goal for Morocco in this one. Ollie, what are your takeaways just from that particular game before we look at the tournament as a whole?
Yeah, I'll give kind of my take on the whole tournament later on, but I thought just in specifically this game, I thought it was important the way they responded in that second half. That, I think, allows Canada to go out of this tournament feeling a bit better about themselves than they otherwise might have. At halftime, I think certainly before Canada got the first goal back, there was really a feeling that this game could get away from them, that it could become ugly, that the team was maybe deflated. Obviously know that they're going to be knocked out of the tournament and not really in the right frame of mind to play this game. The response was really good. That was more like what we wanted to see from Canada. That was more like this team's identity at its best. It again spoke to the resilience of the group, the togetherness of the group, I think was still there. And that was something they needed to answer for after some adversity. So that part of it was encouraging. Like I said, we'll get on to kind of the bigger picture takeaways and what went wrong. But I think just leaving on the right note was something that was important for this team.
Mm-hmm. Jordan?
A bit of a roller coaster, to say the least, Andy. I think when you're looking at the game against Belgium, come out flying, but don't get anything from it. Going against Croatia, best perfect start you could ask for. You score early. And then a game against Morocco is like we shoot ourselves in the foot. Canada goes 2 goals down in the first 25 minutes. Agree with Ollie in terms of the character it takes to fight back after being 2-0 down or 2-1 down at half and try to salvage something. But it seems like this Canada team, just through this tournament and through the experience throughout this game, it's just having all these learning moments all in one. And I'm just looking forward to the next little bit where we can, as a nation, we can just ride behind this team and just sort things out and really push for the next championships or the next games to come.
I can't believe it's over already. The buildup, the wait, months and months, and then 8-9 days, poof, it's over in a flash. It's just so unfortunate that the start was so difficult for Canada in this game because that resiliency, that heart on their sleeve, despite playing a better opponent, was all there. And for the second time in this tournament, they had a superior XG than their opponent. That happened both against Morocco and Belgium. Like, small wins here. I think they left it all out there. There were some lineup decisions that we'll get into that were questionable. But in terms of effort and the way that they ended up performing today, it wasn't perfect. There were mistakes, but that resiliency, that fearlessness that they continue to tote, it was all there. And you end this tournament thinking, what could have been Atiba Hutchinson? How perfect would it have been, by the way, for Atiba to get the equalizer like centimeters? That's all that separated him from a late equalizer, which would have been deserved in this game. I think that going away with that point would have made you feel a little bit better inside. Coming away with nothing seems a little bit harsh. But, another difficult one where the start really hurt them here today.
Yeah, and when you talk about expected goals, that's a tricky one because, again, in this game, Canada actually coming out of all the games, the first games in the group, had the highest expected goals out of every team, 32 teams at this World Cup. And then, of course, today they do it, but the result doesn't go their way. So you always try to make sense of it in your mind. You always want to marry those two. You're like, oh, but the analytics tell us one thing, but the result is completely different. We'll dive a little bit more into that result, as you had alluded to, Gareth, based on some lineup decisions. We're going to continue to give our thoughts on Canada-Morocco, a 2-1 loss. Kristian Jack was at the game, and this is what he saw.
Canada's World Cup journey ends here at Al Thamama Stadium in Qatar after a 2-1 loss to Morocco, ensured they go home with 3 straight defeats at the FIFA World Cup. Ultimately, that is a failure. It is a disappointment, but it is also a remarkable experience for a young team that know they will be hosting the World Cup in 4 years. Tonight was a similar story than the game against Croatia. Morocco played 3 technical plays in midfield. They were very good in the wide areas. Quite frankly, they were superior to Canada in most major areas. They were very good in the first half, rampant through the first 30 minutes, so much so that their home fans, and they felt like home fans here, were doing the Mexican wave and the players were playing with flip-flops on after half an hour. That's how comfortable it was for them, and they could have been up by 3 or 4. There was still positives. Lots of positives for Canada. Tajon Buchanan was undoubtedly their best player here. Scouts have been talking about him. Whenever he gets the ball, there's a roar in the crowd, a genuine excitement. And when I spoke to some of his teammates after the game, they praised him to the hilt. Many people like Atiba Hutchinson used the word brave. Others just said he is simply not intimidated. I spoke to Tajon Buchanan and he said he had a thrill of a lifetime here at the World Cup and he never felt intimidated himself. How he played in this World Cup was a remarkable positive for Canada. Junior Hoylett was very good as well, Alistair Johnston and a few others. Richie Laryea played well in this World Cup and it was puzzling to see him not start in this World Cup as well. A 4-4-2 shape from the start didn't work for Canada, and it proved that with obviously Morocco getting 2 goals off the hop. All these questions need to be asked. John Herdman himself said this week that Canada is now undoubtedly a football country. In the end, they go home much like the brilliant 1986 team that we do not talk enough about, with 3 losses. But in 1986, they could not build on that. Undoubtedly, this team will, and we'll see Tajon, Jonathan David, Alphonso Davies, Ismail Coney, Alistair Johnston, and many, many more playing once again for Canada in 4 years. We can hardly wait.
And isn't that the key, gentlemen? Where do you go from here? Which is why, as much as we have these overarching feelings of pride, and there was so much that was accomplished, there are positives, some individual players here, the positives that we can take from it. But in order to call yourself a footballing nation, in order to move forward and change things, not just for 2026, but the Gold Cup coming up next summer, we have to talk X's and O's. Jordan, you've probably figured out in your short time with us that I am a goalkeeper hugger, and that one hurt me a lot when I saw what happened in the 4th minute to Milan Borjan, who then, collected himself, gathered himself, and then I can't even imagine the panic that he felt either near the end of the game when they were pushing for that draw and then he had to run up. And that has to be a keeper's worst nightmare when the ball then gets punted back the other way and you can't get back fast enough. Thank goodness we have, the speedster, Alphonso Davies, who did get back.
Boyan, though.
It really was. Listen, it really was. But let me ask you this. 4th minute, right? It was a blunder. The whole communication between him, Steven Vittoria, not good. So how much criticism does Borjan deserve, Jordan, for the result of this game?
A fair bit. Canada shot themselves in the foot, and that's based off of a keeper who, rightfully so, during qualifying saved Canada many a time. But he is the only player on the pitch that no one will yell at if you blast it in the stands. No one's yelling at you like that. In itself is your job as a keeper. Like when in doubt, you literally lean back. You can close your eyes and you swing your foot through that thing. To go down in the 4th minute, and that's their first shot on goal is a nice chip. It's amateur. It's naive. It's not supposed to be happening at this level. And then I want to just go and talk quickly about the second goal. Yes, later in the show I'll talk about Victoria and maybe his body positioning. But a rule of thumb: if you're on the side as a striker and you're shooting, the defender's supposed to take the far post with his legs or whatever, just making sure that he can only shoot, the striker can only shoot in the near post area. It should not go through you or under you. If he hits it top cheese, like Andy, we talked about, you'd probably do that, right? You'd hit it right under the bar and in between the posts.
Yeah.
But
perfect shot.
If that's not it, it should be a save. So I'll say this simply. With teams, your best players are the people you look to and you demand a lot from. And Milan Borjan, through qualification, was that player that, hey, Canada was like, he's going to come big for us. He didn't do that in the tournament. And this is no shade towards him. But for us as a soccer country, we have to have constructive criticism. And I think if you were to ask him, he knows the quality wasn't there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we all said, but before the tournament, there were some ingredients during qualifying that were obviously the big drivers of this team's success and were going to be key at this World Cup and needed to be replicated at this World Cup. And One of them was Milan Borjan, as he was in qualifying, was going to need to be outstanding in this tournament if Canada was to have any chance of progressing out of this group. Unfortunately, he was not. He's played a massive part in getting us here. So I think we all respect and appreciate that. But his performance at the World Cup, unfortunately, didn't live up to the standard he'd set during those qualifiers. It is an error on the goal. I don't think Vittoria puts him in a great position, to be fair to him. But like Jordan said, you've just got to put that one in Rosette's. Didn't happen. And the second one as well, I agree with Jordan, is probably one he'll watch and want back too. So that was always going to be something that Canada needed at this tournament, was great goalkeeping. We've seen it from other teams. Poland, I think, are in the next round, mostly thanks to great goalkeeping. It can be a difference maker. Unfortunately, it wasn't quite in the right way for Canada. Yeah,
those are two mistakes. Like, Canada doesn't become the top team in CONCACAF through qualifying without Milan Borjan. Like, how many, we can count so many unbelievable moments that he had. Mm-hmm. Those two goals are both on him. Can't be beat near post, can't give away the ball like that. He knows that. We all know that. And a lot of it was made in the post-match about tactical decisions and the formation. Like, look, there was no surprise what the weakness in this team would be. Like, the central midfield in this game, no Stefan Eustachio. Atiba's not in the starting 11 either. Marc-Anthony Kaye gets put in there with Jonathan Osorio. That was a big ask on those two players. And quite frankly, other than playing Ismail Kone or Samuel Piette, there's nothing else at that position. Who was ready to play in that role? And then when you make mistakes on the field from a tactical perspective or positional perspective, then the goalkeeper is the one player that cannot be making mistakes. They need to be the eraser at times like that to come to the rescue of their teammates. Unfortunately, today, that was the difference in the game. 2 mistakes by Milan Borjan, 2 goals by Morocco. And I'm not putting it all on him, but those 2 goals are just moments that he'd want back. And despite that, Canada were still this close to coming away from the draw in the game.
Yeah, and credit to Milan Borjan. He faced the music, he spoke to the media, and he basically said, I'm sorry, right? Like, that's on me, and that was not how I wanted to perform here today whatsoever. But you just alluded to it, Gareth, when it comes to tactical decisions here, and some of the, like Jonathan David being on the bench. We know Stefan Eustachio dealing with an injury, and also just Alphonso Davies being on the right. It switched. Herdman adjusted as the game was going on, but it did definitely seem like he was experimenting. What did you think he was also just trying to accomplish with what he was doing?
I'm not sure if he was experimenting. I think that was kind of the hand he was dealt. Like, the central midfield area, the suggestion is he should have played 3 players in the midfield. Then you're essentially taking off one of your better players. Who do you sacrifice? Junior Hoilett? Tejan Buchanan? Like, who's coming off if you're going to play that additional central midfield player? I don't think it's quite that simple, especially when your 2 preferred central midfield players aren't available, at least to start this game. So I don't blame Herdman in terms of that decision-making. When it comes to Alphonso Davies, I mean, rather than Davies' positioning, the thing that surprised me the most was Jonathan David not starting. And potentially there's a fitness issue. I'm not sure if that question was asked in the post-match, but that was the one that jumped off the page, Larin over David. I mean, David is all-world. If you told me before the World Cup that he wouldn't play 90 minutes in any of the games, I'd be surprised. Did he play 90 minutes? I don't think he played 90 minutes in the first game. If he did, apologies for being inaccurate there. But, like, the fact he didn't start all 3, that's a shocking decision to me. Again, there has to be something behind that. I'm not in a position here in Toronto to be questioning John Herdman. He understands what's going on in training. Perhaps he wasn't fully fit either to play a full 90 minutes. So that was the biggest surprise to me. As for Davies, I think it's a discussion worthwhile having on this show today. Where Davies and where he's going to be played with Canada moving forward, what's going to provide the best outcome? And I still think that that's an issue that's up for debate.
It is, yeah. And I know we'll get to that one. So I'll just add on the central midfield. I think it's not just about taking out a really talented player from a front line, like Will said, where it's a tough decision. Who do you take out? It's taking out a body from the front line, right? Because that was the decision I think John Herdman clearly made in this tournament. Like, he's not going to get home and watch the analysis and say, oh, yeah, I should have played another central midfielder. Like, it's a conscious decision not to, right? Like, he's doing it for a reason. And the reason was, I think, that this team made a decision that their best chance of getting a result against these teams was to press high. And to press high, you need numbers high. And so I think ultimately Canada never really replicated how good that press was in the first half against Belgium for various reasons, right? Injuries, fitness, confidence dipping a bit, I think, as well. There's tons of different reasons there. But that was the way they decided to approach the tournament. ultimately they just couldn't continue it the way they started against Belgium in that first game. And we saw the team look a bit vulnerable as a result.
Did David surprise you? I mean, Jordan, like that's what surprised me. Like that was the main surprise in their 11th.
It was a big surprise. I think also an even bigger surprise was that, okay, you want to bench him maybe so that in the second half he can come in. But I'm thinking the sub that I can bet on was David coming in to start the second half. To wait to the 60th minute, I was just like, again, Wheels, maybe Herdman knows something we don't know about fitness, so I'm not going to fully bash him. But it was a bit – the game needed something different. And to wait to the 60th minute to make that sub, it was inexplicable in my opinion.
David did play the whole game against Belgium, so apologies. So
I was about to say that was the one game he did play the full 90. Yeah, I don't know what to make of it. I think I was a little surprised too, Jonathan David, but we've seen this before though, as well with John Herdman, right? You go to those qualifiers in Edmonton where against Costa Rica, he gets the lone goal for Canada to beat Costa Rica. And then the next game against Mexico, he doesn't start. I don't know if it was a fitness thing with Jonathan David. I don't know if it was a feeling thing from John Herdman where he just felt like the formation he wanted to play, David just didn't suit it, whether he wanted to rest guys, bring them in later on in the game because he wanted to finish strong, because that's the thing. How you start sets an impression. How you end leaves an impression. So now that it's over for Canada, we're going to talk more about the overall tournament. We were just dissecting Canada, Morocco, a 2-1 loss here as they exit Qatar 2022. But what do we make of the entire performance of Canada at their first World Cup since 1986? That's what we're going to break down next here on Good Night Qatar. Welcome back into Good Night Qatar. Andy, Gareth, Jordan, Ollie still with you. It's okay to have mixed emotions, Canada, because that's how I'm feeling. There obviously is a sense of pride. We've all said that we're using the word pride a lot, doing us proud. We're using the words accomplishments a lot, given that this is a team that is the last time they were at the World Cup, gentlemen. I don't know. Did the internet exist, right? Like, it's been a long time. So there's a lot that they achieved. It's okay to still feel good. It's also okay to feel bad, because at the end of the day, as much as they brought us through this incredible ride during World Cup qualifying, it did end after 2 games. That third game didn't matter to them in the group. They knew they weren't moving on. They do get the historic goal at a men's World Cup, but they don't get that result. It's okay to feel proud and also feel pretty crappy. So I guess the question now, when we look back with these types of, mixed emotions, let's try and pinpoint some things here. Alphonso Davies is the face of the team, Ollie. He's a superstar. He has won many things when it comes, to the footballing world, and with Bayern Munich, some massive tournaments. Did you feel that Alphonso Davies, the deployment of him at this World Cup, does it start to put into question where the best spot is for him on this field? And maybe, at least at this tournament against this type of competition, didn't nail it?
Yeah, I think this is a much more open debate going into next year than maybe we expected it to be before the World Cup. I think before the World Cup, the consensus was we were all on the same page. Alphonso Davies plays in a high position for Canada, wing, up front, doesn't matter where it is. We know that's where he wants to play. We know that's where the team has most commonly used him. We want to unleash him as an attacking force and see him hurt teams in that way. I think coming off this tournament, I don't think he looked comfortable at times in some of those positions. I don't think it helped that he was moved into a number of different positions. He never looked entirely clear what his role was for me at times. And I think there is a much stronger case to be made coming out of this tournament that we do need to think about Alphonso Davies playing a much more familiar position for Canada that he plays for his club with Bayern Munich. Canada's best performance at this tournament came with Alphonso Davies playing left wing back for the first time in a couple of years. And that, I think, is food for thought, going into next year coming out of this, because that's the position he plays, obviously, every week for his club. It's where he knows the tactical responsibilities. It's where he's a massive threat coming from those deeper positions. I think defensively, in a funny way, even though it's a bit more of a withdrawn position, it shields him a bit more, because he tends to be more in position rather than having to track back a lot, which I don't think he enjoys doing necessarily as more of a winger. So that I definitely think, I don't think there's one definitive answer coming out of this tournament, but I do think we're again going to be discussing in a way that we haven't for the past year or two, should Alphonso Davies maybe play in that deeper role like he does for Bayern Munich in a Canada jersey as well.
I think you hit the nail on the head, Ali. The best 45 minutes we saw from Alphonso Davies was the first half against Belgium, playing in a comfortable position. I think people underestimate how hard it is to switch. Like, we're not talking about playing center back or right center back and then playing right back. Like, it's similar in a way, right? You're asking a guy who's bombing forward on the left side to maybe start playing right wing, or just playing in a position where your back's turned all the time as like a 10 or a winger, inverted winger. Like, we've seen through this tournament that Canada has quality, but the best run that they had was that first half against Belgium, where I would say the balance was right all throughout the pitch, especially with Alphonso Davies. Play him in the position he plays all the time, play him in the position that he's comfortable in, and then he can grow into the game and do wonders for Canada.
I understand that, but Herdman requires his players to be tactically versatile. Like, players are moving all over the field at all different times, and they're readily changing. I have no problem Davies playing forward in attack, but I think that you need to have one of him or Tajon Buchanan playing in those attacking areas. Like, Tajon Buchanan plays for his club side as a right wing back or a right back at times. He was playing in a forward role. It works for Canada when you're playing in transition and you have those transition opportunities. The World Cup, guys, is difficult to score goals. And perhaps you need some more technical players playing in those areas. As for the future, Andy, I think it depends who else emerges. Like, is there a left back of the future, someone else that can play that role that's maybe a step up going forward? We'll see. There's a lot of moving parts here, but I'm not resigned to pegging Alphonso Davies just to play in one position.
Yeah, I think if anything, we're just looking at Alphonso Davies. And sometimes when you're so versatile, maybe sometimes that can work against you, because then your coach can switch you up a little too often. And then to your point, Jordan, maybe you just can't get comfortable. You just can't figure that out. But at the same time, what's been great about this team is that they have been able to react very quickly when John Herdman has changed up tactics a little bit. So let's talk a little John Herdman here, Wheels. This was his first time coaching at a men's World Cup. How do you think he did?
Considering the circumstances, I think he did really well. I don't think many people would have thought they would have played against Belgium and dominated the way they did. That second half response against Morocco was very good. The first 20, 25 minutes against Croatia was very good as well. It was just moments that betrayed him and his team. But let's be honest here in this assessment. He was played a crappy hand. A player who is arguably one of, if not the most important player to this Canada puzzle, Stefan Eustáquio, was not fit throughout this tournament. He came into camp, and Ollie, you and I were on a call with John Herdman. He mentioned that a player was doing crazy numbers and he'd been pushed to the limit coming into camp, and he did have concern. Guess what happened with Eustáquio? Couldn't play 90 minutes, couldn't play in the last game. You take away that linchpin from the team, then I think you're a lesser team without him in it. I think there was a knock-on effect, asking too much from individuals in different areas, trying to compensate in other areas as well, and which made this a real challenge. Not to mention MLS players out of season, not to mention Atiba Hutchinson playing one competitive game for his club side, 39 years old coming into camp, not to mention Alphonso Davies in his hamstring. Like, look, there was critical pieces that weren't at full strength, and meaning that John Herdman probably couldn't play the way that he actually wanted to play. So all things considered, I think he did very well.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of that, and I'll give you one pro and one con from what I've made of how John Herdman has managed this tournament. I think, firstly, there's been a lot of criticism, or I've seen some criticism of the way he's approached games. You know, why don't Canada play three midfielders? Why aren't they more tight and compact and play a bit deeper and so on? I think that doesn't really understand that John Herdman and his staff, I believe, looked at this tournament not wanting to just get a point, just get one result somewhere. They wanted to get out of the group, and everything was designed around getting out of the group. And I think the only way that they felt they could do that, obviously you have to win at least one game against one of these great teams to do that, is you have to take a lot of risk. You have to play to the team's strengths, which is make the game really fast, make it chaotic, make it transitional, disrupt their rhythm by pressing really high. The high defensive line has to go with that as well. So there's a ton of risk in that approach, and ultimately it hasn't worked out for various reasons, many of which Gareth just mentioned. But I don't think it was illogical as an overall mindset going into the tournament to try and get out of the group. The one criticism I'll have, or the con, I don't think he got the best out of his best two players at this tournament, in Alphonso Davies and Jonathan Davids. And that, to me, is, we've touched on it, but that's going to become, I think, interesting to see how he handles going forwards. This has been a team where there's been a lot of tactical versatility, a lot of positional switches, a lot of rotating players in and out of the lineup. Like you said, Andy, sometimes David starts a game and then misses a game. I think we need to think a lot more in the coming year or two about how do we build the attack around these two and Tajon Buchanan and get them on the pitch every game, get the best out of them as a combination, figure out those relationships. I just didn't think they were quite there at this tournament.
Yeah. And we're also going to look ahead. We have a lot to dissect here when it comes to Canada and the pressing issues and maybe some changes and things that you want to see before 2026. But at the same time, there were bright spots here, Jordan. When you look at this again, you're looking at this Canadian team, who a lot of Canadians, by the way, were exposed to for the very first time. What were some of those bright spots?
I think the bright spots you can see, even though there weren't a massive amount of goals for Canada, but the bravery that the team played with, and also just knowing that a lot of attacking players will be in their prime or will be playing 4 years from now or 3.5 years from now. I think that's a bright spot. I think to go into a tournament where you were heavy underdogs, but to play like you could win every match, I think that says something about the character of a group. I'm not too sure how many the 31 teams in the tournament would, if they were in Canada's shoes, would go into games the same way they did. But they played their style. They played with their heart on their sleeve. I think that's the bright spot. I think that now is the point where you build off of. The issues of not winning games or not getting a point were coming down to small, like minuscule details that need to be fixed. But the heart, you can't teach that. That's something that you either have or you don't. So I think with that team going into that, the sky's the limit for the future, because if that remains the base, the rest can be taught.
Yeah, two quick bright spots from me. Firstly, the performance of a few individuals who I think are going to progress their careers in the club game. Tajon Buchanan being the big one. Alistair Johnston as well. Kamal Miller in the first game I thought was terrific. And, I don't think they did themselves any harm. And then the second one, and probably the biggest one for me, the Belgian performance. The Belgian performance was outstanding. It's as good as we've ever seen this team play. I know it's kind of been dampened by what's happened since and just the nature of it being the first game. But that was a tremendous performance regardless of result. That was a new standard, I think, for Canada in terms of the way they played in that game. I
agree with all of that. I'll add, part of the World Cup is qualifying. Do not forget that. Like, World Cups are supposed to be hard to get to.
Until now.
Well, yeah, until 2026. but I mean, that journey getting here has Canada believing. It's completely reset the conversation around men's soccer in this country, which is absolutely refreshing. And I actually think that Canada are a little bit of a victim of their own hype, their own expectations heading in. They were completely reset. I'm not talking about a 2-1 win over Japan. It's the way that they navigated themselves and probably punched above their weight during World Cup qualifying. And then everyone expects them to go out and contend against Belgium and the runners-up from the 2018 World Cup, and Morocco, who had a 31-game unbeaten streak heading into earlier this year. And as top-class players, like, I didn't expect Canada to go out and win a game, to be honest with you. I thought it was going to be a feel-good story if they scored a goal. That's the conversation we were having on this show. And if they were able to compete. And I think that they proved that they can compete. Yes, they made some mistakes. Yes, they missed a penalty. Yes, there was moments that they didn't capitalize on. But overall, I'm feeling pretty good about Canadian soccer right now in the direction that we're heading.
So why don't we talk about the direction that we're heading? That's what we're going to look into next when we return here on Good Night Qatar. What are some of the pressing issues for Canada following this World Cup? What would you like to see? Maybe who are some players who we might see on this roster who are not here this time around? That's all coming up on Good Night Qatar. Let's try and look ahead, shall we? I know you're just digesting what happened in 2022, but we are looking ahead for the Canadian men's national team here on Good Night Qatar. Yes, look ahead, see if you could put those other glasses on that can see into the future, Wheels. What would you say is the most pressing issue for Canada soccer following the World Cup?
Okay, I'm going to focus this part of the conversation on the field. I think the development of defenders is essential, something that this country used to produce primarily. Now it looks like we're just lacking in defensive areas. So whatever that next crop of players that are coming through, it's going to be essential. There's plenty of attacking talent in this team, plenty going forward. Young players that weren't even in this team, like Theo Corbeanu, Liam Miller is not a complete article. Go through the list of players on this team. There's so much attacking talent that to get excited about. But to be a little bit more robust, allow Canada maybe to play a little bit deeper at times to pick their moments. They need some top defenders. And I think it's an area that the country needs to develop, and we really need to keenly focus on this next crop coming in and see what we can do with them.
Ollie?
Yeah, loads you could get into here as possibilities, but I think one that has to happen before anything else can really start moving is John Herdman has a decision to make, right, in terms of what his future holds. Because I think, look, you don't want a situation here where the coach is kind of, well, I'll stay for a little while, but maybe I've got my eye on something else, and I'm kind of waiting for that right opportunity to come. Canada needs a coach who is going to be committed through the 2026 cycle. Now, ideally, I think we'd all agree we'd like that to be John Herdman. No one has more experience in the role of Canadian soccer, knowledge of the system. His achievements speak for themselves, both with the women's team and now with the men's team as well. So if that's Herdman and he's committed through 2026, fantastic. But I think we need to know that going in. We need to maximize this 3.5-year period here. There needs to be a real clear plan, clear direction. And my concern would be that if Herdman takes 2 years of it and then moves on, the whole thing kind of falls apart, because he is basically the technical director, the everything to the program, right? And so I would like to see that kind of commitment made, whether it's a new contract, whatever it is, that whoever the coach is going to be here through the whole cycle.
Yeah. Speaking of contracts, nice to see the national teams get that done. We hear we're close, but it's nice to get that done. What are your thoughts on a pressing issue, Jordan?
Yeah, quickly, I'll just add, Andy. A pressing issue for me is just having players playing at the highest level possible. I think going into this tournament, you saw the levels, right? I think a lot of players were playing MLS. It's a good level. But getting close to environments like Lille or Bayern Munich, the guys who are tested week in and week out, we're going to see, obviously, moves with Johnston, maybe more players like it. But I think right now you have a small crop of Canadian players who are playing week in, week out in a grinding league, trying to get 11, 12, 13. I think that just puts the trajectory and puts this team in a different stratosphere.
Yeah, there was a stat that came out, percentage of starting 11 coming from Big 5 leagues in the World Cup. 15% was the number for Canada. So, I mean, when you're looking at players wanting to get more experience at bigger leagues, right? Because you start to look at all the other teams. I mean, Brazil, France, England, Germany, Spain, although Germany's out. Like they're
Croatia,
looking at
Belgium.
Yeah, like they're at 100% of players playing at top leagues, by the way. Croatia, 67%, still high, right? Above 50. But let's talk about the roster a little bit here. I'll come back to you, Gareth. What's the most pressing roster question? So yes, your issues, you're talking about defense, but how about we just look at maybe some names?
Well, there's going to be some names that are going to be moving on in all likelihood. But I think you have the heir apparent in center midfield in Ismail Kone, right? But it's like, how does that midfield evolve? Does it need a different component when you have Eustachio and Kone? And what does the depth look like going forward? And then I think it's just about making sure that, like Jordan said, you have as many players possible who are playing in top leagues and divisions around the globe. So when they come back together, it's going to be vitally important to establish Canada in a number of marquee friendlies. You go down the Qatar route as well and try to get into international tournaments. Like Qatar was in the Gold Cup. They did play in the Copa America as well. Like this is what you need to do for Canada to give these players the requisite experience so they're not going to the next World Cup with their eyes wide open, that they're ready to go out there and compete.
Jordan?
Yeah, I think for me, maybe just being a defender and looking at this World Cup, hoping and praying that, or wishing that maybe I was 6 years younger and 3 inches taller, because I would love to play center back for Canada. Like knowing that there's a need for a robust, no-nonsense man that wins balls and plays forward. Like I'm looking at Steven Vittoria playing. I know we gave it all to the squad, but who knows what that looks like in 4 years? And then who accompanies Kamal Miller and Johnston in the back? Like, is it Daniil Henry? Like, who's stepping up game in and game out? And it can't just be one player. It's like a crop of of 3-4 guys you're looking at that need to step up and do big things for the country. So, and Wheels has played, Ollie has played, Andy, you've played, you watched the game. You need defenders that love defending and that can lead from the back. That's where you build your team, straight through the spine. So for me, that's an issue that needs to be fixed.
Look at the CVs of the center backs in this group that they played. It's like ridiculous.
Yeah.
I was a defender who hated defending, so I'll withdraw myself from consideration.
Oh, that's not a defender.
It's not a defender. It's not a defender.
Cherry picker over here.
Full-playing defender. I think that's the biggest immediate question, I think, is Steven Vittoria. He's not playing out of some sense of loyalty because he's played through qualifying. He's playing because he's the best player Canada has in that position. But you cannot rely on him being at the next World Cup, obviously. So when does that transition happen? Does it happen straight away where Vittoria decides to walk away or Herdman decides to go with another option? Who is that, right? I don't think that's a particularly clear question to answer right now in terms of who replaces him. So that, I think, is the most pressing one, and certainly going into next year with Nations League and Gold Cup.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the guy. I mean, Scott Kennedy had a shoulder injury. We didn't see him here, right? But some other names, and Scott Kennedy was there, Derek Cornelius. But you know, this is what we're going to keep an eye on in the next 3 years, right? Who's going to shine at the CPL, move on as well? And I say that, I mean, you joke, but Joel Waterman got named to this squad. He didn't see any time, but what can he do in the next 3 years to make sure maybe he does see the pitch in 2026, right? So there's a lot of movement that could happen there. What do you think needs to happen, though, for this team to get better, Ollie? How do they get better? Gold Cup is what's next, but, you know, obviously with an eye on 2026.
Big matches against good teams and lots of them. And, you know, we're obviously going to have to finish off the Nations League group in March. So that'll be the first thing. But after that, you want to be in the Nations League finals. We want to get the job done to play games against Mexico and the United States in that small tournament. You want to obviously have a good run in the Gold Cup, but then you also look outside of CONCACAF. And I think there's been some whispers about this on social media, but if I'm Canada Soccer, I would be lobbying very, very hard to be in the Copa America. You know, this is a team that is not going to get qualifying for the 2026 World Cup. We're not going to get that pathway of games and the challenge that they've had to qualify for 2022. So they need to fill the schedule. Some of that's going to be friendlies, but if there's any way to get one of those invitational spots to the Copa America, that would be massive. Any openings like that, I think Canada has to try to exploit and maximize.
I agree with Ollie wholeheartedly. Better competition brings out better performance within players. But I think also in this tournament, even though Canada were underdogs, they're going to go away feeling disappointed because being so close and not getting wins, it should ring something within your spirit. Now, I think when they're training, when they all go back to their clubs, I think what needs to happen to improve is to remember that. Do not go back and train with your club side and drop your level or just kind of play with the guys around you. Remember that World Cup feeling, being there and being around guys who are world class, and you were close. You weren't there. So you have that in the back of your mind. You have that when you're training, when you're playing matches, so that when you get your opportunity again, you're ready to take it. You're ready to kill. Don't drop the levels. Make sure they're high and you're going and playing better and better each time you step on the pitch.
Rapid fire style, better players. With all due respect, they need a better depth of pool of players. Some of that's through development within this country, recruitment, dual nationals, and a little bit of luck. Players like Alistair Johnston, Ismail Kone, these players weren't on the radar up until recent years. Further investment, a much more professional setup off the field will pay dividends as well in a professional environment for these players to thrive. And finally, harmony, peace. People getting along, people aligned, people moving in the right direction, people committed to the cause, all of that is required.
Yeah, I mean, the Federation, obviously, we know this was a massive learning experience for them too, to be at a men's World Cup. So what do they take? Those lessons learned off the pitch to move forward, get that tough competition. That's all John Herdman was even talking about heading into this World Cup. Get us on European soil, get us European, South American competition. He wants to see that moving towards 2026. Here's a look at Friday's schedule. Portugal will be in action. So will Uruguay. Cameroon will end things off against Brazil, with Serbia facing Switzerland. Guys, we had doozies today, though. We have to continue talking about the matches of today. We'll tell you who's moving on from Canada's group. Belgium, you're out. Their coach, done. How about Japan and Spain? And Germany is going home. You're still watching Good Night Qatar. Gentlemen, in Canada's group, so we know they're going home. Do you know who's joining them? Belgium. They're going home. Morocco actually tops the group. Croatia is going through. Croatia, Belgium today, Gareth, they play to a 0-0 draw. What's your takeaway from that?
Croatia let off the hook. Belgium were the better side. Roberto Martinez made some good changes. He's now out as manager. Eden Hazard to the bench, but it's Romelu Lukaku back into the team at halftime and missed 4 golden goal-scoring opportunities. I can't believe he missed on a couple of them. Header straight over the bar for on top of the 6-yard box on the far post, just comes off his body. One off the post as well. He will not sleep for the next month based upon these misses, which really affected Belgium and mean that they're out of this competition. Played much better in this game, deserved a better fate based upon this game alone.
Yeah, absolutely crazy. I mean, we always knew, we were talking about Belgium being a little bit of that older team, but to see them not even advance out of the group is shocking, to say the least. But you know what else is shocking is that in Group E, it's Japan who tops it. Spain is in second. Today, Japan beats Spain 2-1. Jardo, make sense of this.
I laugh, Andy, because if you ever want to see clear skies turn into rain showers, watch that game back. Spain is unbelievable. Is in control. 11th minute, Morata gets a nice header. And then Japan going into the second half, well, I say, you know what? Let's turn it on. Let's have a little spice. Let's score 2 goals in 3 minutes. And we have Doan again in the 71st minute, who was a sub who came on against Germany to score. And then Asono to score in the 83rd minute to be up 2-1. This Japanese team, they never say die. I wouldn't want to play them in a round of 16 because going up against them, you look like you're in control, and all they really need is 5 minutes, and they score 2 goals.
They did the same thing against Germany, plus 12-13 to win the group. They got through the group at last World Cup as well. Just an incredible performance. But, Ollie, Spain played for the loss here. Like, once they knew they were going on, like, they wanted to finish second place in the group.
Must be nice to have scored 7 goals in that first game, right? Yeah. Because, Ollie, Germany wins. Germany wins. But it doesn't matter because even though they're tied on points with Spain, Spain just pumped a lot of goals past Costa Rica, which, by the way, Costa Rica had the lead against Germany. Ollie, what in the world happened there?
I'll try to contain my glee here, but yeah, you're right. That was the most incredible thing about this game was that Costa Rica were briefly leading, and we had Japan and Costa Rica going through from what looked like maybe along with Canada's the hardest group in the tournament. But Germany, They played some excellent football at this tournament, which is the funny thing, given they finished bottom of their group. Jamal Musiala is an absolute superstar. If he could finish a little better, he could have had a hat-trick in this game. But whenever the ball comes into their own area, they are a disaster. Like, there were moments they completely dominated the first half. They were 1-0 up, and then Costa Rica just ventured out of their half for the first time. It was like around the 40th minute. And it was just calamitous from a German defender's. First, Raul made an error, then Rudiger made another error. Neuer had to make a great save. A couple of minutes later, just this routine cross comes in that Nicolas Sula dangles a leg at, completely makes a mess of it. They couldn't defend. They had, and I don't think they had any confidence in their ability to defend. Ultimately, they win the game, but it's not enough to keep them in the tournament.
Germany has had 1 clean sheet in their last 11 games. It came against Oman. Yeah. That's it. Get out of this tournament. Back-to-back tournaments. Failed to get out of the group.
Guys, I'm not going to lie. When you say glee, Ollie, I mean, I know you're referring to Germany, but I actually would have been heartbroken if Costa Rica went through. Because, again, we're talking about another CONCACAF team and Canada didn't.
Keylor Navas made a save of the tournament in that game.
Incredible.
It was unbelievable.
He did.
I would have loved to see Costa Rica go through.
Listen, again, Costa Rica, when you're talking underdog, that great story, they were the great story of 2014. I get all that. But when you're talking about a CONCACAF perspective, that would have crushed me a little bit. I'm not going to lie. That would have crushed me just a wee bit. Apparently, we have a special guest joining us when we come back here on Good Night Qatar. Someone is making a wardrobe change and turning into Nostradamus. I don't know. This is producer Kyle's idea. Let's see if it pans out here on Good Night Qatar. Do not adjust your monitors. That is formerly known as Gareth Wheeler, now Nostra Wheeler. I am not quite sure what that is. That just like aluminum foil that you put together? Why someone even owns that, I do not know, but it is perfect for this segment because Nostra Wheeler is going to look into his crystal ball. I don't think Nostradamus had a crystal ball. I think he just predicted the future. Let's try and predict things here, Nostra Wheeler. Will John Herdman be Canada's manager at the World Cup in 2026?
I am Nostra Wheeler. I am from the future.
Or the past.
We're Nostra Wheels. I'm predicting a name change in my future. John Herdman will be the manager of Canada in 2026 before moving on after that tournament, and he will coach another international side.
Ollie, don't you just feel like we're at like a low budget fair where you're getting your future told to you? Do you agree or disagree with that?
Who am I to disagree with Nostra Wheels? Sure. I think Herdman will still be here for 2026. He's convinced me.
Sure. But wait,
I hope he
what was
will,
the other prediction? That he's going to be with another national team, though, outside of 2026?
Yes.
Jordan, what do you make of that?
I hope he will be, but I don't think he will be. I think that when you do well as a manager,
I'm telling you, he will be. Nostra Wheels knows all.
Nostra Wheels, will Dane St. Clair be Canada's #1 goalkeeper in 2026?
Yes, he will.
You're turning into the 8-ball. Shake. Take a look at it. That's what I feel like.
We do not have humor or laughter in the future.
Nostra Wheels, will Tajon Buchanan move to a UEFA Super Club by 2026?
Yes, he will. In what will be a European Super League.
Wow. That's
you did not just go
Wheels.
there. European Super, get out of town. I feel like we might have to all in order to get the answer we want, we might all have to sacrifice some blood for this one. Nostra Wheels, Karate Kid. Will Canada reach the round of 32 in World Cup 2026?
Yes, they will, Andy. They will go beyond the round of 32 till the final 16 of a home World Cup.
Wouldn't that be lovely?
I've said this a few times over the last few years. This is the dumbest thing we've ever done, hands down.
In Herdman's ears, not dumb?
Yeah,
there is nothing dumb about time travel.
Okay. Will Canada find a new stud center back?
Yes, they will. He's a player who is currently residing in the academy of one of Canada's 3 MLS teams.
Ooh.
Can we play?
What's the name, Nostra Wheels?
I was supposed to say, are we supposed to have like a guessing game here of who that in one of the academies? All right, I guess we're gonna have to. Okay,
not in my job description.
Okay, can we bring back Wheeler, because Nostra Wheels was doing some Karate Kid and then he was like swimming in space at some point. So I feel like unless you want to, you're to the end of the show, it's up to you.
Any more predictions, Andy Petrillo? What else would you like to know?
Wheels,
I've answered all of your questions.
Is Andy going to get paid more money to deal with Gareth Wheeler?
Ooh, perhaps Gareth Wheeler will move on to a new role. I think the title is called Prime Minister of Canada.
False. That's how I know you are a false prophet. You are a liar. Well, anyways, gentlemen, I know we're going to be talking a lot more about Canada here, even though they have left the World Cup. We're going to continue talking about the remaining teams of the round of 16. But, final thoughts here. We've got a minute. Let's go quickly just with you, Ollie. Let's start off and how you just felt.
Andy, I don't know where to go from here. I'm scrambled. I'm unsettled. Feeling incredibly uncomfortable. I'm not sure where Nostra Wheels has gone.
I think that's okay.
Back?
I don't know. Jordo, how you feel?
Hey, guys, what did I miss?
Are you Pokeroo now? Like the guy from Pokeroo was always like, I miss Pokeroo. Because you are
I just
Pokeroo.
had to go refill my best dad ever mug. What did I miss?
I was trying to end like on a really high note. The Canadian men, what a ride. It's been a thrill being on this journey with them. In March of 2021, you could argue it started in 2018 when John Herdman took over, but he was determined to make the 2022 World Cup, gentlemen, after everyone said 2026 should be the goal because you'll just get in as the host nation. So yes, take pride in qualifying for a World Cup, the final 32-team World Cup. You did it. And we do look forward to what's to come for the men's national team. And of course, we do have the women to talk about. Their World Cup is next summer. Bye for now.